Hey, black belt reads. Black belt instructor in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I love coming on here talking about books. Jiu Jitsu and books, my two biggest hobbies. So, my top 10 books of all time. Man, that is a tough one. I read a lot of books. I've read hundreds of books. How do you pick 10 of your favorites? Some of them I went right to on the shelf. I knew exactly what I would go for. Maybe like the top five. It's like I knew immediately what I was going to grab. Some of them would surprise me. It was a challenge to go through and pick only 10 books. I ended up with like 20 books in a stack and whittled it down to 10. If it's hard, why am I doing it? I like to do these reading challenges, like read only Russian books for a month, or read only French books, or read only horror books. Or the last month I did only rereading, where I just only read books I've read before for a whole month. Just stuff like that. Challenge myself to read books that I have been avoiding or maybe wouldn't normally get to. All that being said, one of the challenges I want to do is books that I feel like are going to be all time favorites. I've been avoiding a lot of these books because I'm like delaying the pleasure of them, I suppose. Like I'm slowly reading through Shogun. I want to read Lonesome Dove and The Count of Monte Cristo and all these books that people say are like all-time greats. They're going to be your favorite book you've ever read, and I feel like I need to get to some of those. Time has passed. I need to get to them. So I figured it would be a good time to just solidify right now what I feel like are my 10 favorite books of all time. Because hopefully it will change, right? Hopefully I'll find some more favorites. So no honorable mentions. If I did that, I'd be here all day. I had the whole stack of books and I had to pick 10. The only thing I'll say is I did not put novellas. I did not put short story collections because some of those may have made the list. Like, for instance, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. This is one of my favorite books of all time, but it's like 100 pages, it's a novella. So, not sure if it should go on the list or not. Just know I love H.G. Wells. I love The Time Machine. This is one of the books I've read most. I've read this because it's so short, maybe like 5 or 6 times in my life. Okay, it's time to get into it. I'm going to start with a book probably a lot of people haven't heard of, but it is one of my favorite books of all time. Westlake Soul by Rio Ewers. This is a emotionally devastating book, a really beautiful book. It's about a surfer who's in an accident and he becomes basically in a vegetative state. He's on life support. So, to all his friends and family, he's in like a coma or a vegetative state where he's aware, but you don't really know if he should live like this or if maybe you should pull the plug and say goodbye to him. That's a really tough choice to make. I can't imagine having to make that choice for someone I love. But Westlake Soul, he sees everything that's happening around him. In fact, he is a self proclaimed superhero. So he can travel outside of his body and interact with things. He communicates with the family dog. He sees his girlfriend, his friends, and what they're doing. Um, and this is a really, really beautiful book. I don't know how he did it. I really don't know how to even encapsulate all my feelings for this book. It's absolutely heartbreaking. It made me cry. It made me laugh. Westlake Soul is actually really funny. He's a surfer bro. He says silly stuff like shiznit and stuff, but also the things he's saying are so poignant and beautiful and really, really thought provoking. Uh, I wish more people would check out Westlake Soul by Rio Ewers. All right, moving right along. Number 9, Ender's Game. Orson Scott Card, a very controversial author. I get that. I loved Ender's Game when I read it. I've only read it once, but I read it whenever I was a teenager, and it really, really hit me. It solidified my love for sci-fi. There's only a couple sci-fi books on the list, surprisingly. But Ender's Game, in my opinion, is the number 2 sci-fi novel of all time. Again, I haven't read it since I was a teenager. I feel like it would still hold up. I'd like to reread it again. It's not super long. I haven't read any of the other novels in the series. I actually have book two, Speaker for the Dead. I just never got around to it. But so no spoilers for any of these books. But the twist at the end of this book, it really blew me away. I think it's one of the greatest twists of all time. And it really, really hit me hard whenever I was a teenager. I think this is a perfect book for young adults to read. It's very simply written, but it's got some really deep things happening, and I feel like it's one of the best sci-fi books of all time. All right, jumping into horror. Man, as soon as I said horror, I don't know if you can hear it through the mic, probably not, but it is hammering rain right now and a huge thunder strike. All right, moving on. The first horror novel on the list. I was surprised when I put this list together. I've got a little sci-fi, a little fantasy, some classics, but I think horror wins for the most books on the list. You'll see as we keep going. Between Two Fires by Christopher Ullman. It's funny when I start talking about horror. I don't know if you can hear it in the mic, probably not, but it is thundering and raining hard here, and just a huge boom hit whenever I started talking about that. This is one of the most recent books I've read on the list. It blew me away. I loved it so much. I'm a huge sucker for medieval stuff. It specifically says an epic tale of medieval horror. Yes, this is the medieval horror book to read. I'm a big fan of religious horror. I don't know why that just works for me, like The Exorcist and stuff like that. I love religious horror, and this is like the cream at the top, man. This is one of the best novels I've ever read. I mean, I wish I could put The Exorcist on the list, but to be fair, for me personally, this book just hit me really hard. I loved it so much. It's got some incredibly dark things happening. You know, you got some really heavy stuff going on here, but it's also really beautiful. Especially once you're done with the book and you look back on it, it's a beautiful story. Uh, I'm a big fan of medieval stuff, knights and duels and that kind of thing. There's a lot of that in the book. There's monsters, there's demons, and there's even a point where someone goes to hell. Come on. It's one of the best books I've ever read. Okay, it's about time The King made the list. So, Stephen King, one of my favorite authors. Of course, I'm actually doing a King challenge where I'm trying to read all of his books in publication order. I've read about half of them, I would say. And when I got to The Dark Tower, it really blew me away. It's funny because when I read The Gunslinger, might as well describe it. When I read The Gunslinger, I didn't really like it the first time I read it. But I kept going, and then when I got to book two in The Dark Tower, it blew my mind. It blew me away. I loved it so much. I was a little confused. It was so different than The Gunslinger. But since then, of course, I read all of The Dark Tower. And then I went back and I reread The Gunslinger. And oh, it blew me away, man. I really got a deep appreciation for book one, The Gunslinger. If you've read The Gunslinger and didn't really like it, just please continue with The Dark Tower. Go back. You'll appreciate The Gunslinger so much. It's actually one of my favorite books ever. But if I had to pick one book from the Dark Tower series, it's got to be book four, Wizard and Glass. It's it's kind of funny because there's a huge jump between book three and there's a big wait for book four. Now, it's a little frustrating for people at the time, I think, because there's this huge wait between the series. And then when you get this series, it doesn't actually progress the Dark Tower books very much because this whole book is basically a flashback. So, our gunslinger, they're on a campfire and he's talking to his quartet and he's going to tell a story about when he was a young man. And it is powerful. It is beautiful stuff. And you may be a little frustrated at first, but that quickly goes away when you realize just how good this book is. It's so good it made my top 10 books of all time. I was blown away by Wizard and Glass. I had no idea I was going to love it so much. It may be the biggest book on this list. How many pages? 900? It is, yeah, just about 900 pages. Uh, wow. And King really knows what he's doing when he writes characters. And this is all about the characters. It's heartbreaking. Just totally distraught. Some of the deaths, some of the things that happen. I mean, what more can I say, man? He really is the king. Okay, it's getting very challenging to order these in order. I gotta throw Dune on here. So Ender's Game number 2. I feel like Dune is number 1. Best sci-fi book I've ever read. A little book you guys probably have never heard of, Dune by Frank Herbert. Come on, everyone puts this on the list. It's because it really is one of the best sci-fi books ever. It had a lot of hype recently because of the movies, and I picked up this beautiful hardcover. Um, one of these books that I've bought like 3 times in my life, just because I don't know. I love the book. I've bought it and given it to friends and stuff. I read Dune a long time ago. It's been probably 15 years since I've read it, but I really want to reread it again. It is such a masterful world building. I mean, come on, it's the inspiration for Star Wars. You kidding me? You guys, I'm a huge Star Wars guy. When I read Dune, it wasn't like The Gunslinger where I didn't really get it or like it at first. I was into it. Now, it's kind of a tough read. The first 100 pages, I was like confused. I wasn't really into it. And then something clicked, and I was so into it that I didn't want it to end. It's funny because I haven't actually read any of the other books in the Dune series. I think book 2 is Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, maybe. I have those books. I haven't read them yet. I really want to reread Dune and then get to those books. Um, yeah, this is, I think, one of the most masterful world building novels of all time. 5 down, 5 to go. The top 5, man, it was so tough. I got to throw The Terror in the top 5. This book hit me hard, guys. It was one of my favorite books I read ever. I think it's maybe been like 3 or 4 years ago. I think maybe it was like 2021 when I read this for the first time, and it was my favorite book of the year. Obviously, uh, it does a lot of things for me that just really work. Historical fiction, check. Horror, dread, confusion. You don't really know what's happening. There's monsters. There's starvation and cannibalism. There's a redemption arc for our protagonist. These things all worked so well for me. Man, the scene with the monster of the novel is so wild. It really was shocking to me. If you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about, where they get face to face with the monster. I was just like blown away. I couldn't believe how creative it was and how fun it was. I read this during the winter time when it was snowing outside. The descriptions of the cold and the hunger and the dread from the monster and being trapped in the ice, this stuff all worked so well for me. It's one of my favorite books I've ever read, and it made me a huge Dan Simmons fan. I've gone on and read like 4 Dan Simmons books, but for me, The Terror is the best of his works. Okay, actually, the only fantasy book on the list, surprisingly, you could maybe call Wizard and Glass fantasy. So maybe we'll call that fantasy, but you could also call it horror. Anyway, A Song of Ice and Fire is my favorite fantasy series I've ever read. I haven't read that many of them, to be fair. I just recently reread A Game of Thrones, and I loved it so much. It was so fun to be wrapped up in that world again with these characters and all the plot lines. And man, George R.R. Martin is an amazing writer. Everyone knows how good the plot and the characters are, but just the way he writes a sentence is beautiful. I mean, he's actually a really talented writer, which maybe he doesn't get enough credit for. Anyway, book 3, in A Song of Ice and Fire. Storm of Swords. This is like the peak of A Song of Ice and Fire. Book 3 and 4 I thought were amazing. I mean, what can I say? Without spoilers, this book has some absolutely devastating moments in it. Some iconic imagery happening in this book. I don't want to spoil anything. You guys probably all know and have read this book. It's one of the most popular books ever. I read that the Game of Thrones books were like top 10 for highest selling books of all time. Up there with like The Alchemist and Harry Potter. I mean, that's crazy. I didn't realize it was that popular. Just because of the show, I guess. Anyway, I I read this originally maybe like 10 years ago, and probably closer to like 15 years ago at this point. So it's due for a reread. I got to read Clash of Kings, and I'm so excited to get back to this book because it's going to break me. I know it. But even knowing what happens, I loved rereading Game of Thrones so much. Uh, so we'll see how I feel when I get to the Red Wedding. All right, so maybe the most recent book on the list that I've actually read, East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I read this either earlier this year or late last year. Man, like I said at the beginning of this video, there's certain books that I get because they come so highly recommended. I feel like this is probably going to be a favorite book of all time for me. And this was one of them, East of Eden. Even having those high expectations, it still worked for me. What can I say? It's one of the greatest books I've ever read in my life. It's beautifully written, so beautiful, very simply written. It's not like Faulkner, where it's like a challenge to read and understand what's happening. This is very simple, but it worked for me so well. It's a huge book. It felt like it was 100 pages. I absolutely tore through this thing. I tried to read it slowly, but it's so good that I could not help but just tear through it. It's like, how can you slow down? It's just so good. It's got some really, really dark things happening in the novel. Of course, you know, Kathy, the mother, and all the horrible things she does. What happened to Lee's parents, and all that is really, really dark, but it's also got some beautiful stuff, especially the stuff with Samuel. I mean, he's one of the greatest characters I've ever read. So it's kind of a play on Cain and Abel. It's got a lot of biblical, you know, allegory and stuff like that, which I loved. There's so many beautiful quotes in the book, like when they talk about Tim Shell and that's what makes man great. It says ladder to the stars, stuff like that. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. One of the best books I've ever read in my life, and yeah, the best classic book on the list. Okay, I see a lot of these videos, and people are like, I'm only going to put one book from this author and only one of this and this to make it fair or whatever. That's not what I did. I literally just grabbed my 10 favorite books I could find. Just so happens Stephen King made the list twice. What can I say, y'all? King is one of my favorite authors of all time. I mean, he's probably number one, really. He's also written like 100 books, so it's not really fair, right? Wizard and Glass, oof, man, that's almost my favorite King book, but I still think it is the best Stephen King book. And also, I feel like it is the best horror book of all time. It is the ultimate horror novel. I legitimately think it's the greatest horror book ever written. I think Pennywise is the ultimate horror villain in all of fiction. And I've read this book 3 times. That's how much I loved it. It's super long, um, maybe even longer than Wizard and Glass. Yeah, it's like 1,000 pages. So, again, I bought this book several times. This is just a little mass market I have. That old school picture of King. Man, just reading this book, learning about the children, figuring out all their unique little quirks and how they work individually, how they work together as a group. Beautiful. one of the best coming of age stories ever. I mean, I grew up in this sort of time when kids would just go outside and wander in the woods and play. So that kind of stuff really always hits me heavy. I think it is the second greatest book I've ever read in my life. All right, guys, number one. So if you've ever been here before, I'm sure you know number one is Suttree. I went through a phase where I read every Cormac McCarthy book because I kept hearing he's one of the greatest authors of all time. And unfortunately, since then, he's passed away. But at the time, he was alive, and I was reading all of his books. I was really into his works. I read every single thing that he's ever published, other than his two newest books. I want to get to those soon. But my favorite of his works was Suttree. Not only was it my favorite of his works, I knew instantly this is like my favorite book I've ever read. It's a very personal for me book. It's like speaks to me. It's like he wrote it for me. I'm kind of the black sheep of my family. So is Suttree. A lot of these things that are happening to him, I can relate to. He's very uh, intelligent, kind of well-off guy. Comes from a wealthy family, but decides to put all that away and just go live a simple life. He just wants to be a fisherman on a river. And, why would he do that? Well, he's just trying to find himself. He's trying to find meaning in this life. He has all these drunken adventures with his friends. The book is so dark, but it's also so funny. Like some of those moments in the book where he's drinking with the boys is so funny. I literally would laugh out loud reading it in public. You look at me like I'm a crazy person. Like how many books actually make you laugh out loud? That's really rare. This book made me laugh several times. This is the only book I've ever read that I can remember, especially an actual full-length novel, not like a short story or something. The only book that I've ever read and then immediately reread it. Like how many of you guys have ever done that before? Read a book and then immediately read it again. So yeah, I've read it twice. I loved it even more the second time I read it. It's just that when I read it, I'm like, okay, this was such a for me book. I just, overthinking it. I got to read it again to see. No, man, it just solidified how much I loved it. I loved it even more the second time. I want to read it a third time. What can I say? This is a book very specifically for me. So that's the list. That was tough to put together. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you've never been here before, please consider subscribing. I got 600 subscribers now. Really cool. Thank you guys all so much. And yeah, I'm going to be working on Shogun and Lonesome Dove and some of these books that I hope are like all-time favorite books of mine. So maybe the list will change. Yeah. Until then, see you guys.